Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. From its beginning, CMC has welcomed everyone. I'm Kelly Atkinson, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director and the Columbus Office Administrator at Barnes & Thornburg. I'm also the Chair of the CMC Board of Trustees. We would like to thank the Ohio Chamber of Commerce for their special support for today's forum. And today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. So let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. Experts say there's never been a labor market like the one we're seeing now. With the recent announcement of Intel's investment in Ohio, plus a tight job market and continued business growth, workers are enjoying boom times while businesses are worried. Where will businesses find workers? Will they be qualified and willing to work for pay rates employers can afford? What should educators do to fill the pipeline? What government policies might help or hinder the search for workers? We'll explore these questions and more with today's speakers. Please welcome Ola Snow, Chief Human Resources Officer for Cardinal Health, Steve Stivers, President and CEO of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and our host, Lisa Patt-McDaniel, President and CEO of the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio. You can learn more about today's speakers in your forum flyer right on that front page. So Lisa, we look forward to today's conversation.
You want to just start answering all those questions? As you know, workforce is an ongoing, never-ending conversation right now, and both employers and job seekers are anxious to make the right match, but what we need to talk about today is how that happens. So, my panel, what I'd like to ask you first is what you think are the primary challenges for employers in recruiting talent today. And what do you perceive to be, are these the same challenges or different challenges or a little bit of both from that magical February of 2020 right before the pandemic started?
Do you want to go first?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us, and thank you to CMC for having us here today. Just a reminder for those of you that maybe don't or aren't as familiar with Cardinal Health, we just celebrated 51 years. Started here in Ohio as a small food and drug distributor, and now 47,000 employees across the globe, right here in Dublin, Ohio. You know, I have been in that in the CHRO job for about 3.5 years, 21 years with a company, and we've always had this saying about a war on talent. Well, that is nothing compared to what employers are facing today. Availability of talent, having the right workforce at the right time are all issues that I think every employer is facing. And really, I think our job as employers to meet our employees where they are and to meet future employees where they are as well. I think that there are some same challenges, Lisa, that we've always faced. I think we have some of those challenges that have been way amplified. I mean, I'd love to say flexibility is new. It isn't. It certainly is amplified and now an expectation versus a really kind of nice to have. But I do think we have to think about that movement in the market. How can we attract employees to our workforce? How do we think about the cultures of our workforce? How do we let our employees thrive so that they can not only thrive but grow within our workforce? So it really is still about attraction and development and retention of talent at companies, but they are real. They are real around both the availability and, quite frankly, I think remote work has both given employers opportunities but real challenges. We don't want to see our great talent leave to go work for another company from another state, even though that they can sit at home here in Ohio. So we talk about it every day, not just within the human resources practice, but at the executive tables and the boardrooms. So I'll let Steve kind of build on that as well.
I think that she really teed everything up really well. I think some of the key challenges we face are the labor participation rate is now 61.5%. Pre-COVID, it was 63.5% in Ohio, and on a 5.5 million person workforce in Ohio. That's 110,000 people that were in the workforce that are not in the workforce anymore. So that alone is driving part of our issue. We've got to figure out how we can do things to get people back in the workforce. Other things that happened during COVID, we reduced our childcare capacity because many childcare centers closed down, didn't open back up, or opened back up at a reduced capacity. They can't find workers either. They tend to pay lower wages. Those folks are going to other positions, and so it's slower to build that capacity. That's one of the limiting factors. Transportation is another limiting factor that we've talked about, and those are, big challenges. The other thing that Ola, I think, alluded to is the competition that did not exist pre-COVID with work from home. Companies out of Chicago and Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles and New York City are recruiting in a labor pool they didn't get to use to recruit in Central Ohio, and saying to those people, we'll pay you a little more than you were making here. By the way, it's less than they would pay in Washington or Chicago or New York. And that company also doesn't have to have bricks and mortar because you're now working from your home. They get access to a new labor force, but to our existing employers, that's new competition. And so you add the new competition to the fact that the participation rate is lower than it was, and we have a giant problem. And we've got to figure out how to deal with it. There's, automation and artificial and augmented intelligence that's coming. Rocky from Nationwide is here, and they're doing a lot of investment and a lot of our companies are, and my member companies are investing in automation, not because they want to, but because they have to. They can't find enough people. So, we'll dig into those and many other topics. I've already gone on too long, but those are a few key points that I think have come about since COVID that we're all challenged with. And by the way, I want to welcome the students from Otterbein here. We're going to take a little survey later when she asks another question, I'm sure, about how many of you are going to stay in Ohio, and I'm looking forward to finding out.
You have a little time to think it through. So, yeah. So, yes, these are really big challenges. Ola, I hear you talking about what I would call how can Cardinal be an employer of choice, right? And I'm interested, Steve, if when you look across your members, how many of them, and what are they thinking about doing differently to make sure that they're employers of choice?
Well, we're seeing our larger companies like Cardinal and other big companies offer things like healthcare on site, offer childcare on site, offer transportation to get people access that might not have had access to their facilities before, because they've got to get people, not just to Dublin, they got to get people to Rickenbacker, they got to get people to, all these different places that they are, and sometimes that's challenging for some employees. So there is great competition to be employers of choice. The problem with that is not everybody is going to be able to be an employer of choice. That's putting a lot of pressure on smaller members. So we have 8,000 members at the Ohio Chamber. 4,000 of those members are small businesses. And they have, less ability to pay higher wages. They have more pressure and not as much scale to do some of the other neat things I just talked about to make them an employer of choice. And so they're the ones who are sort of left holding the bag, because the big employers can become an employer of choice and sort of throw some assets around. But, small business is still the engine of growth in Ohio, and we've got to make sure we get them access to labor too. So we've got to pass policies in Ohio that make Ohio a place where people want to stay and in-migrate to, because we literally don't have enough people, and we can talk more about that in a second.
Yeah, we absolutely will. Ola, what?
I'll add a few things. When someone asks me all the challenges of COVID, I also like to talk about what I think about the good things about COVID. I think the employee-employer relationship has totally changed. Now, the expectations are totally different from employees, and one might say their expectations may maybe over of what employers are necessarily willing to do. But we communicate very differently with our employees. Our trust numbers have gone up. When COVID was in full swing and our employees were coming to work every day and part of our organizations, but at home, in other words, they look to us for lots of different things. I'll come back to this flexibility. It's not just about being flexible so that I can work from home and, put something in a crock pot or change the load of clothes, but it's meeting people where they are on their benefits. I need childcare, but I maybe not need tuition reimbursement. So how do we think about that? 10 years ago, I never had a candidate ask me about culture. I never, ever have a candidate that just doesn't ask me about culture, but every single person on our team. So employees have choices where to go. They want to go where they can thrive. They can bring 100% of themselves to work every single day, that they believe in the mission of the organization. And I would say that as employers, that has been a really great thing, is to understand how are you that employer of choice so that you can bring in employees that want to serve the mission, serve your customers. But again, we talk a lot about money, and certainly we have lots of people that are lured away, but we attract a lot of people through our efforts on culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And benefits is certainly an important factor, but I think employer and that relationship within that employee and that employer is actually strengthened through this as well.
So, employees have a different expectation. A place like Cardinal has different roles. Not everybody at Cardinal can work remotely. You've got a whole logistics piece, and you have to kind of be there to do those jobs. How do you balance that? And I think that also leads into, we have these smaller employees. If you're a retail establishment, if you're a restaurant, you can't work remotely. Kind of have to be there. So Ola, how do you balance that at Cardinal, the fact that, some people very well and easily can do their job remotely and they can do it from Florida. Other people really need to be there day to day, and there's not really an opportunity to make that different.
It's a great question, and one that we've had to change even some of our philosophies as we think about workforce. And to give perspective, about half of our workforce, as you said, continue to come to work every single day to deliver goods and services to our healthcare professionals and settings, and that was pretty important, especially given the time where hospitals and practices were overrun. So we set this. It doesn't sound as grandiose as it was, but we put some guiding principles in place, and every one of our employees knew that mission. First and foremost, it's about safety. Second of all, it's about keeping the health care system going, which was critical, more critical than ever before. And employees are tied to that mission, so they understand their roles. But you do have to look at almost segmenting your population and what works. We treated our hourly population and rewarded them for coming to work every single day. To know that they were both appreciated and that their safety of not just them but their families were in place. So we came and implemented mental health strategies out in our everyday workforce, childcare, as we said. So you have to get comfortable around differentiating your workforce more than you have. But again, that comes back to that culture. It comes back to that benefits program. How do you meet people where they are and meet them where their needs are as well?
And I think Ola really hit on it, but every job is not the same and every employee is not the same. And so there are some people who want to go to work. Let's do a quick survey of the crowd. This is the audience participation part. How many of you like going to work every day and don't want to work from home? About half the folks. Now, put your hands down. How many folks really would love to work from home every day? A few. Okay. So there, 4 days. How about 4 days a week?
4 days
Raise
a week.
4 days. Okay. Okay. A lot of hands went up. Good job.
All my
Matt Habash
Cardinal
wants to work
people,
4 days
raise
a
their
week.
hands.
3. He wants to go to 3. We got an auction going on. So.
Rocky, you can come to Cardinal to do that.
But it's, the point is, not every employee is the same, not every job is the same, and so different people are attracted to different things. But I will tell you, our small business employer have had real pressure on wages. Every employer has. So, I was talking to one of our small business employers that's in manufacturing, and he's increased his wages $1 an hour 3 times already, once this year, twice last year. So, he was at $17.50. He's now at $20.50 for starting manufacturing out of high school, no extra education. I mean, that's a good wage.
Yes.
But it's also, it's putting pressure on them to raise prices, which we're all seeing. Inflation 7.9% last month. Part of that's driven by wages, and part of it's driven by other factors, but a big chunk is driven by wages, and that's why I hate to tell you inflation's not going to be temporary. It's going to be here for a little while, because that pressure on wages is not easing up yet. So sorry if I got us off track a little bit.
No. I think that, something that we think about at the Workforce Development Board is an employer only has so much margin to pay wages, right? And certainly they should pay what's fair and what they can afford, but we have to also talk, I think, about job quality, right? If I can only pay you $19 an hour, then we got to start looking at job quality and what,
Make your
right?
experience better.
Right,
And
make
and
your
a lot of our employers, big and smaller, every employer's doing that. I think they're working with, as Ola said, the employers now got to appeal not just to the wages, but to the lifestyle, flexibility, and the quality of the job and what you do. So there's a lot of that going on at every company I talk to.
And I realize sometimes you have to be a little more creative for some of our smaller employers, and I don't know, maybe even some of our larger employers. But we're willing to kind of sit down and help, smaller businesses think through that. I think there are solutions that we just have not thought of yet, just due to lack of imagination. But now,
We refer some of our members to the workforce board because, when somebody says to me they can't get workers, I'll say, hey, you should call the workforce board and chat with them about it, because you can help them be creative. And you're a great resource.
yeah,
I'll
thank
say
you.
this from a larger employer standpoint too, is I think large employers have to think like small employers. And what I mean by that is, how quickly can we make decisions? How can we cut through some of the red tape? How do we have employees making decisions and empowering those decisions? We lose employees to small employers because while there are advantages to working for big employers, there's certainly advantages working for small employers as well. So we have to be big but think small is what we say at Cardinal many times, because we have to, again, meet employees and empower employees so that they can feel close to that mission.
I think that's a great point. Employees are looking to be empowered, and many of our small members are able to do that really, really well.
So let's go back to our students. We need to try to keep as many of our future workforce here. And that's future workforce coming out of our 4-year institutions, our future workforce coming out of our high schools. So what do you think about that? What do you think we need to be doing?
Well, I'd like to start on that one. I brought this with me because I find it really interesting. Adam Lewin, who runs a company called Hamilton Parker. Many of you might buy your tile or brick or home improvement stuff from Hamilton Parker. He's been trying to get interns at his company through high schools. He called 4 pages worth of folks. Last year, there's an intern program in Columbus. I'm not going to mention who it is because they failed him, and he called them and asked them for 2 interns, and they promised they would send interns in May. They didn't show up in May, they didn't show up in June, didn't show up in July or August, and they never called back. So, and this, if anybody knows where Hamilton Parker is, it's off 670, right off the freeway, you know, in a part of town where there's a lot of people who are probably not going on to college and could use a job. And he's willing to pay his interns and train his interns and then hire his interns. So when you look at Ohio high school students, and Ryan knows this, about half of them don't go on to college. But the curriculum is built for the half that do go on to college, and we don't do enough to connect the other half to work experiences, to internships, to training, and then jobs. We've got to do a better job. I talked to Paulo Di Maria before he left the Department of Education. He was totally bought in and great, and then he retired on me. So we'll see who the new superintendent of education is, and I hope they care as much about the 50% of kids that don't go on to college, because we're failing those kids in Ohio. And we need to get them linked to jobs, get them opportunities in the summer, starting their freshman or sophomore year to experience a few things, and then figure out what they want to do and connect them to a job so that when they graduate high school, they know what they can and have an opportunity to do. And then with regard to college, we are super excited about the Grow Ohio Act, which John Cross, a state representative, has, that does a bunch of things. Among other things, it creates tax incentives for businesses to create internships for college students. It creates scholarships for out-of-state students to go to college here in Ohio. And then it allows students, listen, Otterbein students, it allows students who graduate from an Ohio institution that stay in Ohio to not pay income tax for 3 years. So, and I personally would send you a refund, because we all know how well the COVID checks went. I'd actually, if I was doing it, I'd send you the check, because nobody understands what not paying taxes is, but they understand a check. I would have you pay it and then send you the check, your own money back to you, and you'd be really happy. But John Cross has you not paying income tax for 3 years. It's a big deal. And that's a game changer that will increase the number of internships, externships in Ohio, connect college students with employers, hopefully encourage those students to stay here. Let's do that quick survey. If you're an Otterbein student, raise your hand. Great. I see 4 or 5. How many of you, keep your hands up now, how many of you plan to stay in Ohio after you graduate?
Oh, they're afraid to say different.
No, okay, 1 hand went down, that's okay. We don't have mountains and we don't have oceans, but you know what we're gonna help happen at Lake Erie? You won't know you don't have oceans here. So we're super excited about what the Haslams are doing with Lake Erie to help create a sense of place, because it looks like an ocean if you're sitting on the shore of Lake Erie. And by the way, if any of you have not been to the Hocking Hills, go down in the Hocking Hills, you'll think you're in mountains. And, you know, hemlock trees grow there because it's 15 degrees cooler in the Hocking Hills. So explore what we have in Ohio. We have more bike trails than any other state in the country. We have great parks. We have a low cost of living. Remember this, someday you're gonna want that if you're leaving Ohio. And we have a really high quality of life. So we just need to market Ohio better. But I am impressed that 4 out of 5 of the students either didn't want to admit they're gonna leave Ohio or aren't gonna leave Ohio, but I'll take it. So that's great, and we'll work on the other one. There's some jobs we just don't have in Ohio, and I get it, like you can't be a marine biologist in Ohio. I don't know what you want to do, but there are a lot of things you can do here, and we have a really high quality of life and a low cost of living. By the way, there's 3.5 million people that grew up in Ohio that don't live here now. And if they lived here, Ohio would be almost 15 million people. And we would have, let me do the quick math, divide by 700, we'd have 21 congressional seats if they lived here. We have 15 now. So, well, we have 16. We're going to have 15 in January. So that's we won't get all those people back, but we need to figure out how to get a bunch of those folks back, and other people who may have no connection to Ohio but have the skills we need to get them to move to Ohio. So we're for creating a public-private partnership to do just that, because whatever state figures that out is going to win in the future of the battle for talent. And, you know, once you guys see what we're going to do with Lake Erie, it's going to be super cool. Stay long enough to see that. And there's a whole bunch of other things. We're going to invest in a sense of place in Ohio with some of this one-time money to help make it a place that people want to be. And we're super excited about it. I think it's going to be really fun.
Just for the record, I have 2 of my team members that we moved to Ohio here in there. From an employer standpoint, I think Ohio is a great place to be. You can probably tell I didn't grow up in Ohio. I'm probably the only person that migrated north instead of south. And I've lived in Ohio for 17 years, which is the longest I've ever lived in a state. So
You're an Ohioan.
I am an Ohioan, okay. And I have 2 kids in college in Ohio as well. But from an employer standpoint, we think about it, right, as a corporate office of a very large organization. We have jobs everywhere. But there is a very good advantage to growing leadership here in Central Ohio, or having folks come to Ohio. We support remote work, but there are moments that matter that we need to be together, and that you have access to things in a corporation, especially based in there with leadership opportunities, or just access, quite frankly. So we look at our intern programs. We pay really close attention to where we recruit, because we don't want to have, our intern program is a great pipeline for us to hire employees after, so come to Ohio, come to Cardinal Health in your internship programs too. But we found we were, recruiting kids from all over the country, and they just went back, and they didn't even stay with our organization. So we do recruit across the state and Midwest and maybe in other parts with that intention. It is good for all employers to think about that strategy as we think about growing our employee base in Ohio as well, and talent base, quite frankly.
And you did talk about all the great things about Ohio, but when I used to sell the state, one word, we have water. And you move out to Arizona, but they're not going to be having water pretty soon.
For the next 50 years, that's
Yeah.
our competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Our 100 years, water. Clean water, we hope.
Clean, fresh water that you don't have to desalinate.
Yes.
And I just want to clarify for all of you, when you gasped about the income tax, you cannot now go to college and go get another degree so that you can get your income tax forgiven.
Hey, read the bill, maybe you can, I don't know.
So, but speaking, more about education, what do you both think is education's role here in the state to, number one, prepare the talent you need, and number two, to help us keep people here?
All right, well, I think we need all levels of education. So I talked a little bit about K through 12. Western Governors University here, it's an online university, an inexpensive option and a great option for training workers. We need tech schools, we need high schools, tech schools, 4-year degrees, graduate degrees, professional degrees, and we need to have it accessible to everybody. And so that's why I like the Tech Cred program, which is a program that helps existing employees upskill. It's a big deal. It will pay for a lot of, not everything, but it started just in tech, and now they're expanding it out. We added an extra $50 million in the budget last year to help pay for that, because we do have to upskill the current employees we have. As technology changes, you can't just rest on your current educational attainment level. You've got to continue to upgrade your skills, and I think that's the thing that our community colleges and some of our innovative career centers do really well, and Tech Cred is a really important piece of that. But we've got to have more people graduating with 4-year and professional degrees as well, because we're going to need them. And Intel is bringing in great jobs, but and some of them you can just have a high school degree, but some of them you need a PhD, and That's why our educational institutions are at the table, whether it's Columbus State, Ohio State, Western Governors Universities, all the four-year universities in the state and community colleges are collaborating on preparing the state for that, and another announcement that's coming in Northern Ohio here shortly that'll be a big deal. So we're super excited about what is coming to Ohio, but we've got to be ready. And then there's existing employers that, of course, have to fill their students or their jobs. So the educational infrastructure's got to be able to do all of it, and it's going to have to scale up in a big way over the next few years.
I'll make just Steve said that so well. I'll make just a couple of more comments. One, I think both in K through 12 as well as higher education, we also have to be talking and teaching our students about working together. So technically, they're coming out with these great degrees, but then they get in a team atmosphere, and we're putting a lot on our kids, especially in higher education, to go out and build a resume. It's been all about you. Well, now you're transferring into an organization where it's many times around the team. So I love these universities that have learning commons and are bringing kids together to work on projects together. Some of this generation likes to work alone, but I think that's incredibly important in any small or large business. Is how do we work together towards one goal? From an employer standpoint on upskilling, it is front and center for, I think, all organizations. And this digital transformation that's going on is where you have to think about where your capabilities are going in another 3, 5, 10 years. I co-sponsor, along with our CIO, Digital University. Anyone in our organization can take Digital U, which is really about digital skills, and then having partners, as Steve said, so that your hourly organization or your organization that doesn't have higher education has affordable education, so that they can come on and have many of those opportunities that are coming online right now. So it is the responsibility of our education partners, but at corporate levels, we have a responsibility as well for our current workforce.
Great. I love to hear that. I'm quoting you. Steve, you were talking earlier about half of the people in Ohio, kids, go on, matriculate to a 4-year college experience. But we also know the dirty little secret that 50% of them might do that, but then less than 50% of them may actually finish that degree, that 4-year degree, in 6 years. So we have a lot of people in the state who may have some college, but may not have other credentials. And we know, and I know a lot of your members, and I know, Ola, that you have jobs that don't require that college degree. What do you think we should be doing as educators, as people in workforce, as policymakers to address that particular group who are a huge source of talent for all of us?
Well, I think part of what we need to do is be connected with our colleges and universities better, so that when somebody falls out and doesn't continue on, doesn't re-register for another quarter, the college university sends that information to a local workforce board or somebody to say, hey, this person isn't in school anymore. You might want to, talk to them, and they're now available to work. And lots of times they drop out because they need to work, because something in their life circumstances changed, or maybe there's an educational reason why they dropped out, and or it's temporary for one reason or another. So I think we need to make those connections better, but then we need to make access to the short-term credentials that can have them get a better wage be very accessible, so that they don't have to wait a long time to increase their wage, because lots of 60, 90-day certificate programs can increase your wage by $4 to $5 an hour, meaningful increases.
Lisa, you said it well, as I think employers also have to really look at what are truly the requirements of a role, and is a 4-year degree really necessary? Or is an equivalent of job life experience? And this is where equity comes in. I think many of you know this already, but if a woman or a minority reads the job description and doesn't necessarily see that they have all of the credentials or education, they won't apply for a job. They are much more likely not to apply for a job if they can't check every single box. And we don't see that. So we went through thousands and had conversations with our leadership team to say, is this really, now we're not employing lawyers without degrees or anything like that, but you know, in many areas, life experiences does take over for that 4-year degree, and so we really have dug in as a conversation as part of our commitment towards equity to have some of that and take some of that off the table, as well as other efforts that we're doing.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So I just want to take a pause quick here. We'll move to questions from our live stream and our in-person audiences in just a few minutes. If you have a question, you can start to make your way over to the microphone now. But before we take audience questions, I'm going to ask one final question of our panel. So my final question is, what do you think, what innovative ideas would you suggest to grow our talent pool here? In addition to considering talent pools that currently aren't tapped.
I'll start. You know, I would say, you know, first and foremost, we've all talked about the benefit of keeping our people in Central Ohio. We've got to start thinking about STEM programs at the elementary school level, especially for women and people of color. We've got to consider where we recruit from. Steve talked about our partnerships with K through 12, and that not every student is going to go to on to higher education. So how do we start thinking about it earlier in the lives of our children, quite frankly, so that we can, I know that's playing a game of long ball, but we have to do that as well. You know, I would also say, how do we think about grants on innovation and technology? And so how do we start talking with our higher institutions about the jobs of the future that we need so that we can start training those middle schoolers for what we think is going to happen in 5 or 10 years. So those are some of the things that we talk about. But STEM and apprenticeships and internships that Steve talked about earlier is key to that strategy as well.
I'm glad you mentioned apprenticeships, because that is a big initiative of ours, because we know we can have people work, earn, and learn at the same time as when you hire them. They may not be completely ready, but an apprenticeship is a great way of bringing them in and teaching them what they need to know.
Great.
Steve?
I have 3 quick ideas, and I've referenced a couple of them. The first one is for those students who aren't going on to college. I think we should create a statewide public-private partnership that starts in late in middle school, early in high school, to connect those students who don't think they're going on to college to paid internships for the summer. We need to give an incentive to employers to offer those paid internships and then build that as a pipeline to employment. Second, it's about getting people, understanding the universe of people who might be able and willing to move to Ohio. There's 320 million Americans. We have 11 million people in Ohio. We believe there's probably a great universe of about 10 million people that we could and should look at that are looking for and willing to relocate to have a high quality of life and a low cost of living. And we think we should focus on the people that have the skills, degrees, certifications that we need, whether it's, and it might be a truck driver, it might be somebody working in a restaurant, it might be, you know, we need to look at the jobs we have to fill and get people to move here to fill them, because we have a shortage and we need to admit it. There are more people or more jobs available in Ohio today than people on unemployment, and it's going to get a lot worse in the coming days. So those 2 things and the Grow Ohio Act that would connect those, for those that are going to college, get more of the elite students coming to Ohio, and encourage those folks to stay in Ohio after they leave. So those are 3 ideas that I think would be really helpful on workforce.
Fantastic. Well, let's move. It's CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. Jane Scott, over there of CMC, is curating questions today from today's live stream audience. For our in-house audience, many people have already joined Jane at the microphone. So please keep your questions brief and to the point. Jane, what's our first question?
Thank you. Obviously, you have hit a chord with the audience here in house, and I have a couple questions from online, but I'm going to defer mostly to the people here, and maybe we can keep the questions and the answers brief so we can get everybody done. So I do have one question, picking up on Steve's comment there. Is there an organized, state-funded effort to recruit employees to this state, similar to what we have with Tourism Ohio and the Find It Here program? Or is that the role of Jobs Ohio or the Ohio Chamber? And how can we do that if it's not there? It seems like it's a big, big need.
The answer is there's not yet, but it's one of the things we've floated that we should do. We think it should be a public-private partnership. We think it could be funded by one-time dollars for a couple of years and from the federal money, and then assuming it works, we believe the private partners would be willing to pay to keep it. But we want to get that created, and we think it's a very worthy effort. Jobs Ohio is one place you could put it. I personally, and they have the value of Jobs Ohio is they have money, they have an ongoing revenue stream. But I actually believe in focus and would rather have Jobs Ohio bring companies into Ohio and have a separate, very focused effort focused on bringing people to Ohio to fill those jobs. So, it might be Jobs Ohio, it might be somewhere else. We're going to work through the policymakers over the coming months, and we hope to get that done.
Hi, I'm Bill Lafayette. I own Regionomics. I've got all kinds of questions, but I'll just ask one. Early on, Steve, you talked about other companies from other states pirating our workers for remote work. To what extent can we pirate people from other states for our companies here?
The answer is absolutely, and probably Ola could speak to it, but we can and should, and I think we are.
We are, absolutely. So it was when I referenced that there were opportunities and challenges. The challenges obviously is it has opened up a talent pool that our employees are going to work for companies in other states, and we are doing the absolute same thing. So again, some of those we lure to actually physically the state, but even folks in other states that are working. So it is a absolute two-way street, and every employer is seeing a job pool availability that we didn't see before COVID, or maybe weren't just as open to it.
Great question, Bill. Former chief economist of the Columbus Chamber, right, Bill?
Hello, I'm Bill Wayhoff with Steptoe and Johnson. There is this big move in the last 10 or 20 years to for applying for jobs electronically. And we have all these people who are seeking jobs, and then we have companies who are recruiting through electronic means. And it seems like a lot of them can't somehow get met up because the algorithms aren't bringing their resumes up to the top. What do you think about increasing support and increasing the number of job fairs and things like that, where companies would really have a chance to meet people in person rather than just relying so heavily on the electronic method?
I think it's a combination. It's a great question, and a combination of both. It's around meeting your candidates where they are as well. Steve alluded to, we should be out talking to high schoolers about our opportunities, great jobs in warehouses, distribution, manufacturing centers. I will tell you though, this younger workforce is pretty digitally, they want to do things online. So how do you make that as easy for them as possible? But understanding those, but you have to do a combination of both. Again, that's at career fairs. I think colleges are doing great jobs to match their students with employers. But it's a great question, and I think a combination of both is probably the key to his success. Steve, I don't know if you
I think that really answers it, but the other thing that went through my mind as you asked that about the algorithms is, is there a diversity, equity, inclusion element in those algorithms maybe not picking up more diverse populations? I'm not an expert on that, but it certainly piqued my curiosity, and it's something I'm going to look into a little bit. But it's and maybe Ola can speak to that.
Steve, I was going to say, you can't rely on one place, right? As an employer, you've got to seek out those diverse job boards, job organizations that can bring you diverse slates of talent. So you have to fish in in more than one pond, so to speak, and bring all of that talent to your process.
Great question, Bill. Thanks.
Yeah, let me just add really quick. I'm not sure job fairs are always the most effective either for our companies. What we like to do is find out what the positions are and create like a targeted event where people come and interview where we've already prepared them so that we know that who we're bringing to the company is prepared to answer the questions and would be good for the job. So we already have that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, and we can make that marriage, right? And sometimes with a job fair, general job fairs, people are wandering around. So
I'll share with this group, because I think it's fascinating for us all to understand this, is before a typical job seeker would go out and say, I do this job, let me go find a job, and I'm going to match up. That is not what's happening anymore. College graduates and even non-college graduates are saying, these are the 5 companies that I want to work for. I'm going to go research what jobs they have open. Oh, wow. And so it has completely changed. Over 65% of people now decide where they want to work because there's so much, there's more
Yes.
work, there's more availability of work than people. So that's why things like culture and mission and diversity and equity and employer of choice, because we have people saying, I want to work for your company. What can I do? Not I do this, so I'm going to go find a company where I can do that. So just be aware that's an opportunity and a challenge, but it is changing in the marketplace as well.
Great point. And to Bill Lafayette's earlier question, the other thing, and the younger students might agree with this, the other thing we've seen in the younger generation is they decide where they want to live first. It used to be people got a job and lived where they get a job. Now they decide where they want to live and then they get a job. So it's you have to have a sense of place if you want to attract people.
go ahead, Patrick.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick McLean, CFO for the Adam H. Board, and I might mention that I am one that left Ohio and have come back, so consider me pardoned.
You're back.
Good to see you. My question is this. You've talked about some great ideas. You've talked about a lot of headwinds that we're facing. And we might do all these great things, and we might even do them well, and it still might not be enough. As probably all of you know, we're in the middle of a demographic trough with people of college age, and it's going to continue for another 10 years. So we haven't mentioned this at all, but where does immigration fit in all of this? There are some highly qualified people that speak English and would love to come here, but right now they're going to good jobs in Canada and Australia.
I totally agree with you, and having spent a decade in Congress, Congress is probably going to fight about that for a long time. One of the reasons they go to Canada is Canada has merit-based immigration. So if you have the skills they need, you move to the top of the list. The United States does not have merit-based immigration. I've been a longtime proponent of merit-based immigration. I'd love to tell you that international immigration is the solution. I think it's part of the solution. I just think that knowing my former colleagues, they're going to debate about it for the next decade. And I don't think it's going to solve anything, which is one of the reasons the Ohio Chamber sort of pivoted to national immigration, getting people to move here from other parts of the country, because, you know, nobody can stop us from that, whereas Congress has to change the immigration laws. I still hope that we move to a merit-based immigration, but we're not there yet.
And I think as employers, we have a responsibility to make sure the people who represent us know our views on that. So we are completely aligned on that issue, but right now a federal issue, but we certainly have great government relations folks, and it's on the agenda for sure.
Hi, my name's Mindy Wright. As a member of the Program Committee for CMC, I want to thank you for presenting an informative and interesting panel. My question follows up from the discussion about education and also about working collaboratively, particularly with people who are different from you. What role do legislative efforts to prescribe what is taught to students in classrooms play in a well-educated workforce? And I'm thinking here particularly of House Bill 327 that prescribes against teaching divisive content.
Yeah, so the Chamber doesn't have a position necessarily on 327 itself, but I will tell you, at the Chamber, we're going to be reluctant to tell teachers and school boards that run our education how to do their job. You elect a school board, they get to decide what happens in your school district. That's what I believe should happen. And if you don't like what the school's doing, elect new school board members. But the problem is, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and to a legislator, everything looks like a bill.
Hi, Eddie Pauline with BioOhio. I've come to appreciate that workforce is really high-touch work, and I'm interested to know if either, Ola, you're aware of Cardinal making any strategic investments directly with academic partners to fund their workforce development support, or Steve, if there's any among your members that have been strategic directly with academic partners to allow them to produce the talent that we believe we need, and if those are replicable to other businesses.
From a Cardinal standpoint, we put a lot of investment, what I would say, in our internship programs, working with those college partners, work with some different economic development around education as well. So can't think of a specific example to give you off the bat, but again, we are really committed. Work really closely on both business development as well as education development and health equity and development with partners like the Ohio State University, University of Cincinnati, and some other institutions as well. So hopefully that answers your question. I'll defer to you too, Steve.
So yeah, so a lot of our members are starting to do that. You all saw that Intel just announced $50 million agreement with Ohio Higher Education. Some of our pharma and biological members that I know you know really well are also working on it, but not all those are sort of announced yet. There's folks in the pipeline working with our colleges and universities. What I will tell you is the current environment for workforce has created an opportunity for entrepreneurial folks in the educational space to make arrangements with individual companies, but that's sometimes hard for our state-supported schools because entrepreneurial is not a word that describes most of our four-year educational institutions as much as I'd like it to be. But I think as you're starting to see some of these things happen, it's creating an awareness among the college presidents that they need to have more entrepreneurial activity with regard to workforce development, especially for the highly skilled folks. So Christina Johnson at Ohio State is working hard to become much more responsive. She's running 1,000 miles an hour right now, doing a great job. But, you know, frankly, we need all of our four-year colleges and universities to become a little more entrepreneurial in that way.
You said entrepreneurial, it made me think of one more thing, and we have a really collaborative partnership with the School of Pharmacy at The Ohio State University. But one of the things that we also do, so not at the education level, but we work with women in pharmacy in a program called Women in Pharmacy, not maybe the most innovative name. But how do we take a pharmacist that can become a small business owner? Most small retail business pharmacies are actually owned by the pharmacist that sits behind the counter that also owns that store. So we want to see more women in pharmacy, but we want to also see more women business owners across the network. So it also think about the innovative ways that around your business that you can help start business and small businesses. More retail pharmacies for us is a good thing.
I love what you're doing through Medicine Shop that way, Ola. And I know you've got a test facility in Marysville. My old friend Dave from Dave's Pharmacy sold to you guys, and you guys are using that as a model for the rest of the country. Pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
I will say where we need investment by the private sector is in career exploration from 5th grade up through high school. And that is the future workforce. And I do believe it's a challenge to both of you that the private sector needs to step up, because otherwise you don't have people now. And what Steve said earlier, you're not going to have people in the future if we don't do that now. Yep. So, okay, so we are wrapping it up. We wish we had more time, but we don't. So I am going to step down here and turn it back over to Kelly Atkinson. So I want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for joining me up here.
I hope everyone found today's forum especially insightful. I know we probably have even more questions and just don't have time to ask them, but you gave lots of great ideas too. So lots of proposed solutions. We can all go back and implement all of these things now. So please make plans to join us next Wednesday for Women Entrepreneurs and Changemakers, CMC's annual Mary Lazarus Legacy and Civic Engagement Forum, featuring Stacia Naquin and a panel of Central Ohio leaders. Thank you again to the Ohio Chamber of Commerce for their special support of today's forum. Thank you for the online virtual seat patrons and to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. And our special appreciation to today's speakers, Ola Snow, Steve Stivers, and our host, Lisa Patt-McDaniel. Thank you all for joining us. This matters so much that you're here. Really grateful that you're in the audience today or watching on the live stream, and we really couldn't do it without you. We look forward to seeing you next week as the Columbus Metropolitan Club presents another community conversation. Now enjoy your Wednesday.
Thank you. Okay, just stay seated.